Hi everybody, welcome back for another video. My name is Jasmine, founder of Moment Tax Services, and in today's video I am going to discuss the top 10 or 12 questions that we got after posting yesterday's PPP loan to grant video that we got. And I say loan to grant because it does definitely start off as a loan, and depending on how the funds are spent and whether they are spent according to the guidelines set forth by the forgiveness clause of this application, then you can turn it into a grant and possibly have the loan in its entirety or partially forgiven. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. All right, guys, so I have a set of questions here that I copied and pasted from our group after posting the video, and I am going to address the ones that I found to be the most applicable for answering. There's a few that I am not going to address simply because they are the most basic things that I discussed in the first video, such as what do you put for your business legal name, or what do I put for my EIN number if I don't have one. It took me 7 hours to record, edit, upload that video yesterday. So it kind of hits me a little hard when questions are what do I put for my business name, because that was like addressed maybe 3 times in the first like 2 to 3 minutes of the video. So in any case, in today's video, I'm going to for sure talk about at least 10 to 12 questions that we got that are just random questions that some people might have. And then subsequent to that, I will go through and discuss how the forgiveness application works and how you should consider the forgiveness calculation of this money that you will take initially as a loan and then hope to apply for the loan to be turned into a grant. All right, so number 1, we filed jointly. Can I still apply? Also, I didn't get the first one. Can I still apply? The answer to the first part is we filed jointly, meaning this person files their taxes jointly. Can they still apply for this loan? And yes, you would be, I'm assuming the person who's writing this message is the one that's self-employed. So you would be applying for the loan with your information as you being the sole proprietor. And although you file your taxes jointly, within your joint tax return, you will still have a Schedule C that pertains to you as the sole proprietor. So in uploading your documents for verification of being self-employed in order to get this loan or grant, you would be uploading your Schedule C, which will prove that you are self-employed, regardless of the fact that the overall tax return is a married filing jointly tax return. And the second part of the question was, I did not get the first one. Can I still apply? You can absolutely apply for this second round of the PPP, whether you got the first one or whether you did not get the first one. So let me be clear. If you did not get the first one, when you're going through this application, there's going to be a question that says, have you received PPP funds before? You will elect no. If you did get PPP funds the first time around, and not EIDL funds, not the $1,000 grant, not the loan that came through the SBA, not that. This is entirely separate of that. So if you did get the PPP funds the first time around, then you would indicate on this application that you did get the PPP funds the first time around, and then that will subject you to 1 or 2 more qualifications that you have to meet in order to qualify as a second round recipient as opposed to a first round recipient. All right, guys, the second question was, thank you for this video. My first loan was through Kabbage. They are not yet accepting round 2 applications. Do you recommend that I wait for Kabbage to start accepting them, or to save time, go through Lendio or Bluevine? I personally would apply through Lendio or Bluevine. And if you have not already gone through the whole loan process and been offered a loan through Lendio or Bluevine by the time Kabbage opens up their portal, then you would have already gotten it done and you would just accept your loan through Bluevine or Lendio. My point in this answer is that you are able to apply through multiple lenders such as Bluevine, Lendio, or Kabbage, but be sure to only accept one of the loans. So if you apply through Bluevine and you apply through Lendio, Lendio is giving you a ton of you know what, because they want this, that, and the fourth that you don't have, or they're asking for things that someone else is not asking for, then you can just continue through the lender that's maybe a little bit easier, more feasible, more efficient. You like the color of their website better, whatever the case might be. And you can have multiple applications processing at the same time. But when it comes down to them offering you a loan, you can only accept one loan. And if you try to accept two, both of them will get rejected because both of them will be forwarded to the SBA for approval, and the SBA will see that there's two pending accepted loan offers for you. So definitely make sure that you only accept one, even if you apply through multiple lenders. All right, third question that we got, which was a prominent one across the board from a lot of people, is will this be reported as income on next year's taxes? I am going to say no, and I'm saying that based on the precedent that was set by the first round of PPP. When the first round of PPP came out, they said, and they, meaning the IRS, said that because it was going to be forgiven, and if you qualified for it to be forgiven, then it would be reported as taxable income. Then they changed their mind and said they would not be requiring for it to be reported as taxable income, but that if they weren't going to require that grant to be reported as taxable income, then they also weren't going to let you deduct those expenses that you paid for using that grant money on your tax return, which made no sense, because then that would mean it would essentially be taxable income again if you're not able to deduct the expenses on your tax return that you use that loan money for. So for example, if I got a $10,000 grant and I paid my employees with that $10,000, they were at first saying that, sure, you don't have to report it as income, that $10,000, but then you also can't deduct that $10,000 that you paid to your employees as an expense. That would still result ultimately in that $10K being taxable income if I couldn't deduct the expenses. So overall, and as of now, the IRS has confirmed that you do not have to report the grant as income, and you will be able to deduct the expenses that you use this grant money for on your tax return anyway. The fourth question, someone says, I am nervous about doing a preliminary Schedule C because I want to go off of what I made for 2020 since I didn't work that much in 2019 as an independent contractor. I do work with a tax preparer, but I will not have my Schedule C for a little while longer. What will happen if I put some numbers on my Schedule C mock-up that don't end up being what's actually on my Schedule C that I ultimately file in my 2020 tax return? So for that, I would say, and I messaged this in the comments to a few people too, as long as you are not inflating the numbers on your Schedule C to qualify you for a loan that's thousands of dollars more than it would be if you just had an accurate Schedule C tax return, there's not going to be an issue. Again, just make sure that you're not deliberately adding $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to your net income in order to be able to raise that average monthly income calculation, which is used to determine your loan amount. All right, guys, so number 5. This question is a little bit ambiguous as to what the person was actually asking, but I have an idea of what they're asking and I will address it, because even if this person wasn't specifically asking for this, I know that others are. So the question says, if we got the first round grant that was given last year, can we also apply for this one? So I touched on this a little bit in question number 1, which is the grant that most people right now are referring to that they got, and whether they can get this one now, this PPP one now. I have to make clear that these are 2 entirely separate programs. The first one was an EIDL program, which is the one that offered $1,000 per self-employed contractor, or $1,000 for each employee of a business. So if you're a business, let's say you're a corporation and you had 10 employees, you were able to get $10,000, namely $1,000 per employee. But if you're self-employed, for example, a VIP kid teacher, then you were getting $1,000 as a grant, and then they offered you a subsequent loan in addition to that, which you could have taken or you could have not taken. So this question says, if we got the first round grant that was given last year, can we also apply for this one? The answer is yes. Even if you got the $1,000 grant through EIDL, that still keeps you eligible for applying for this PPP program. Again, because they're entirely two separate programs and one doesn't depend on the other in order to qualify. Now, you will notice that while you're going through the PPP application that I made a video about yesterday, there is a section that's going to ask you to include the amounts that you got for the EIDL loan, but not to include if you got the $1,000 grant. So that's the only relation the two have to each other. And to be quite honest, while we're on this subject, I might as well say, I was having this conversation with someone in the comments yesterday. I don't know why the PPP application asks for you to enter in your EIDL loan amount. So I know it's because they're trying to offer you to refinance that EIDL loan into this PPP loan, because the EIDL loan had a 3.75% interest rate and this PPP loan only has a 1% interest rate. But the terms of the loan are entirely different, and allowing you to refinance that first EIDL loan into this PPP loan sort of suggests that you would be able to apply for forgiveness of that EIDL loan by way of it now being joint to this PPP loan, which I can almost go out on the edge and say 100% that they are not going to be allowing anybody to be applying for forgiveness of that first EIDL loan. I have clients that got 150K plus on that first loan. They're not letting anybody get by on that one. So for the sake of this question, yes, you can apply even if you got the EIDL grant or loan, but we don't know specifically what the intention behind refinancing that loan into this loan would be, if not for forgiveness purposes. All right, next question says, some lenders are asking for different documents. What do we do? So this was also another one that I knew was going to end up being frustrating, simply because Lendio is going to be trained by their managers to ask for certain documents. Kabbage, Blue Vine, same thing. They're going to be asking based on what their administrators are training them to ask for. And ultimately, it will cause a little bit of confusion. But one of the specific things was, and this kind member in our group, she was sending me screenshots of the emails she was exchanging with the agent over at Lendio that was asking her for a copy of her 1099 miscellaneous. She said, I know you mentioned that you don't have to have the 1099, but this lady is asking me for the 1099. What do I do? So I encouraged her to email back and say, well, how can the 1099 be a required document if not every self-employed person gets a 1099? And plus, even if you had a 1099, the 1099 statement does not prove your net income, which this Paycheck Protection Program is 100% based on your net income. And the lady didn't have an answer for her. She said, well, just send me what you have. And as a matter of fact, she said, I don't think we would be processing the application for people who don't get a 1099, but send me what you have and I'll see what I can do. That's not really a definite answer. And surely it's not a correct one, because not every self-employed person gets a 1099. I mean, if you are someone who sells flowers, you're not getting a 1099 from the people that you sell flowers to. So it would be up to you to keep track of how many flowers you sell, how much you sell it for, and at the end of the year, report your gross income, your expenses, and have a net profit. So my advice on this one would be to upload as much as you can that will prove your self-employment, such as the Schedule C that they're asking for, the bank statements that you possibly have your income being deposited into, possibly a W-9 that you filled out for the person that you are going to receive a 1099 from. Like in our case with VIP Kid, since VIP Kid has not sent you guys your 1099s yet, maybe you can just Google W-9, fill in the information that you would put on your W-9, and include that in the information that you're uploading, because I did see a couple of people also say that some sites were asking for them to upload their W-9s. They're all kind of doing something different, but just do what you can to push through with uploading what you can, and then it will probably get to a point where one of the agents will just be emailing you, asking you for extra documentation as they're processing your application. Okay, so the next most frequent question that we had was, I've moved over the summer, or I've moved since I filed my last tax return. Should I be putting my current address on the application or the previous address that was on my tax return? Although I'm not expecting them to send any snail mail, and most, if not all of your communication is going to be via email, I would still put your current address. Hopefully your driver's license or your bank statement also has that updated current address on it, so that at least two of the documents that you're uploading, namely the current documents being your bank statement and your application, have your current address on it. And then you would be uploading your tax documents, and if an agent is emailing you, you can let them know that you've moved since then. I could also say that you might be fine with putting your previous address that was on your tax return, because you're not going to be expecting any mail from them, and the communication will be via email. But that will just come down to like a comfort level for each person, because someone might say like, well, what if they do send me a letter and I don't want the new people at the address getting mail for me? Some people might say, well, I just recently moved and I already put in a mail forwarding request, so even if they do send something to me, it would be forwarded to me anyway. I have gotten 0 pieces of mail from the first rounds of applying for EIDL or PPP. None of my clients have received a single piece of mail. So if that's any assurance to you, all of us have gotten email communication in one way or another. So you can really do either one, but obviously I would say putting your current address on applications that you're filling out would probably be your best bet. I would just hope that you also have some other piece of documentation that also has that address on it, namely your bank statement. Like surely if you moved, you probably updated your bank address straight away. So then the bank statement that you're uploading for verification would also have your current address on it. Okay, the next question was, and we got this in several different ways from several different people, but basically the point of the question is that I worked all of 2019 and most of 2020, but I did not specifically work in February of 2020, either due to COVID or to health reasons or having a baby or whatever the case might be. Will this disqualify me? No, it will not disqualify you. The point of having a bank statement as of February of 2020 is to show that you were in business before February 2020. So in this case, I would upload January 2020, perhaps December 2019. And then if you only skipped February in the middle and you didn't work, then potentially upload the bank statements that you have for after February of 2020 to just show that there was a gap in February of 2020 for whatever reason, but that you were in business and operating as a self-employed individual prior to February 2020. Okay, the last question we have before we jump into the forgiveness calculation portion of this is going to be, I had a loss in my business income last year. Can I still apply? And the short, concise, brief answer to that is no. Reason being, the Paycheck Protection Program, as I mentioned earlier, is solely reliant on your net income, net earnings in your business in order to divide that number by 12 months to get your monthly average income, and then to multiply it by 2.5 in order to determine your loan amount. So having a loss in your business technically means that you didn't have a paycheck going home to you during the year as net income. And so that would disqualify you in the sense that there is no average monthly income for you to take and multiply by 2.5 in order to determine your eligible loan amount. All right, guys. So for the juiciest part of the video that I know you've been desperately waiting for, I have a handy dandy whiteboard here with 2 different scenarios so I can thoroughly explain how the forgiveness calculation will be administered. And before I explain this, I want to tell you 2 key points that I want you to keep in mind while you're listening to me do these 2 examples of the explanation. One of them is that when you go to apply for forgiveness of this PPP loan that you've received, you will choose either an 8-week forgiveness period or a 24-week forgiveness period. So if you need 8 weeks to meet one of these scenarios in order to have your loan fully forgiven, then you only need to do tracking of your expenses and whatnot for 8 weeks. If you don't have a higher net income to be able to squeeze all of your loan into 8 weeks for all these expenses to be met, then you can choose the 24-week period, and then you have a 24-week period to meet these expectations of the expenses being spent, okay? So that's idea number 1 to remember, which is that you're gonna choose either an 8-week period or a 24-week period. And then the second thing to remember is that 60% of the loan amount that you get must be used for paychecks, meaning for payroll if you're paying other people, or 60% of it must ultimately be your net income in those 8-week or 24-week periods, whichever one you choose from, in order for the entirety of the loan to be even eligible for application of forgiveness, okay? So just remember those two things, 8-week period or 24-week period, and minimum 60% has to be spent on payroll / your net income paycheck in order for you to be eligible to apply for forgiveness. Both of those things will make more sense for you when I explain this calculation. All right, so let's get right into it. In both of these examples, we're going to use a 10K PPP loan to calculate forgiveness, or for me to show you how the forgiveness will be calculated, okay? Now, do not look at these examples to determine how I got a 10K loan. The purpose of these examples is not to achieve getting a 10K loan. The purpose of this example is having a 10K loan and being able to show you in these two scenarios how it would have been forgiven. Because if you do the math over here, 2.5 times the net income does not equal 10K to get a 10K loan. But this was the best example for you to just understand how the forgiveness of it works, okay? So in example number 1, we have a business that grossed $20,000. So for somebody who gets a 1099, just to keep it simple, gross is the total amount that you make. Net is the take-home amount that you make after expenses, right? So 20K gross for somebody who gets a 1099 would be, for example, getting a $20,000 1099, okay? So in this example, we have somebody who got a $20,000 gross business. They had $5,000 in expenses, and their net income was $15,000. So a VIP kid teacher that made $20,000, they had $5,000 in expenses for supplies, their accounting, their utilities, expenditures overall for their business, and the net income of their business that they paid taxes on was $15,000. And remember that we said they got a 10K PPP loan that we're trying to consider forgiveness of. Since I said that at least 60% of your loan has to be spent on paycheck or payroll, then 60% of this 10K is $6,000. For someone who had 15K in net income, boom, they already met the threshold for forgiveness of $6,000 being 60% of their loan. And as a matter of fact, they don't even need to dig into the details of this 5K, because 100% of their loan at 10K would be satisfied by their 15K net profit. So technically that means 100% of their loan was spent on paychecks or payroll. And again, there would be no need for them to dig into the details of their expenses. I think that was pretty clear, but if it wasn't clear, then I'm hoping that the second example will make it more clear. Because in this example, we have someone who does not need this easy of a calculation, and you'll see how the difference over here works. So let's say over here, we have a business, again, same $10,000 PPP loan. We have a business that grossed $15,000. So let's say, for example, their 1099 from wherever they're getting it from is $15,000. And it was their first year in business, so they had a lot of expenses. It was 10K in business expenses, and the net income on their tax return, on their Schedule C on their tax return, was 5K. If you consider that they got a 10K loan and they need 60% of it to have gone to payroll before they can be eligible to apply for forgiveness, we would need 6K net income to meet this, right? They don't have 6K in net income, so this person would not be eligible to apply for forgiveness because they need to first meet a 60% threshold of their net income being towards paychecks or payroll in order that they qualify for forgiveness. Now, I'm going to turn this example into somebody who does qualify. Let's say, for example, instead of 10K in business expenses, let's say they had 8K in business expenses and their net income was 7K. So now that we still know they need to meet 6K in paycheck or payroll qualification before we can worry about the remainder 4K of the loan, we'll look and say, okay, they need 6K in payroll. Well, great, they have 7K in payroll. So we know that they qualify for the 60%. And so since 7K of the loan can be forgiven because it was allocated to payroll, there's another $3,000 of the loan that we still need to get forgiven. Now we can dip into the $3,000 up here for operating expenses, which are the second set of expenses that you're eligible to use this money on in order for it to qualify for forgiveness. So in this 3K here, it could have been, interest or supplies or any kind of operating expenses that you needed for your business, depending on what kind of business you have. So in both of these cases here, now these two people would be eligible for forgiveness, the basis being that 60% of it first has to meet the payroll or paycheck minimum requirement. And then if you don't meet it just through payroll, then you can dip into the other expenses that were up in your tax return for expenditures related to your business in order to qualify for the remaining amount of it to be forgiven. All right, that made sense in my head. I hope it made sense in your head. I tried to do my best with this little whiteboard I got from Target to help it make sense in your head. If it didn't, please leave a message below. We will do our best to get back to you guys individually. It's not as feasible to direct message me individually because that takes a lot longer to get through everybody. And I'm sure more than one person has the same question. So I encourage you to leave your questions down in the comments below. It helps the YouTube algorithm. And we look forward to having you guys as subscribers. We look forward to having you hit that notification bell so that you can be notified as soon as we upload videos. These programs are usually time sensitive, so it's in your best interest to hit that notification bell and be a part of our YouTube family. All right, guys, I look forward to seeing you guys in our next video. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll be back with another video regarding the EIDL loan as soon as the SBA gives us more information that I'm able to share with you. Take care. Bye-bye.